Welcome, everyone, to another live episode of 451 Degrees. Joining me today is Joe Garza. Joe Garza was actually on the first episode of this series. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, thanks for having me on. It's great to be back.
Yes, definitely. And you host the Reckless Muse cast, and I've been on that a couple of times. Always love coming on your show.
Oh,
And today we're talking about Hollywood and streaming networks and their response to watering down what scripts they're willing to produce based on ideology, for the most part,
right,
ideology.
right.
Because you write screenplays, yes?
Yeah. Not professionally, but it's something that I did move down to LA to focus more on. So I don't claim to be like an actual like industry insider, but I do have friends and acquaintances who are closer to the industry. So I definitely hear quite a bit about um, what's going on in the industry and some of the risks that are starting to emerge from some of these new diversity, inclusion, and equity initiatives that are being forced on filmmakers these days.
So, like, I always assumed that a lot of this came about from 2020 from the Academy's inclusion rules that they have, which
Right.
we actually have.
Hmm.
We could share that.
Yeah.
Uh, let's see. Maybe I can just do it. Oh no, she did. Okay. So they have this came out in 2020, and it's this weird thing where they say that they're not gonna essentially that they're not going to have nominees that don't have specific amounts of representation in them.
Right.
So, like, if you would get standard A on screen representation, themes, and narratives. Uh, and it requires things like, Asian, Hispanic slash Latinx, Black, African American, Indigenous, Native American, Alaskan Native, Middle Eastern, North African, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, other underrepresented race or ethnicity. So there's this idea that, you have to have significant amounts of your roles go to diversity. And I felt like this kind of trickled down to what producers were willing to produce when they had their hands on scripts. Do you think that this has like a major effect on that?
I think so. So let's look. This is from 2020. I don't know if you saw recently, but the Academy has actually updated these. So I believe these rules are actually going to be more strict. More
More
strictly
strict.
enforced. Yeah, so there's a new initiative. This is from the Academy's website. It's an initiative called the Academy Aperture 2025. And so the LA Mag did an article on this back in March of this year called "Are the Oscars Over?" And
Oh yeah, there's a link to that Academy Aperture 2025 on this
okay,
page. It's
oh,
up
okay,
towards the top, actually. There it is.
okay, I see. Huh,
Yeah,
I wonder
there
why
it
it's
is.
still. Oh, okay, I guess they just didn't update the date there because it says September 2020.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it's so yeah, we're probably on the same page here. But yeah, this is I think going to cause a lot of problems. So in the LA Mag article, there were some anonymous sources from the industry. Of course, they wanted to be anonymous, and they were talking about how anti-creative these initiatives are because so, for example, I actually have a quote from the article here from someone here. It says, "I mean, why aren't animals in this? What if the main character is a horse?" So it's like where do we draw the line if there's not enough diversity, there's not enough inclusion?
Yeah,
I
what
think,
is how
yeah,
does Zootopia work
right,
on this
exactly,
level? Is that have to be you're hiring voice actors that represent these groups? Is that like what is the transfer there?
right,
It doesn't make any sense. Or if you're literally doing a live action movie and you have but it's mostly about horses,
right.
like what do you what do you do there?
Right, exactly. Or what about some of the main characters are aliens or monsters or something like that? Well, do they have to fall within certain ethnic or sexual groups as well? It's vehemently anti-creative because it's putting a lot of extra pressure on screenwriters because it's like, well, I thought I had a complete story. I thought it made sense and everyone was on board with it. But now I have to go back and change this and that for no other reason than simply to satisfy, only so, this film will be Oscar eligible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, or The Simpsons, Maggie Simpson. Does that mean that we have to get a real baby to play? There's no line that's drawn here. And I think one of the big frustrations that I have with the concept of diversity and inclusion, and equity, as well as many of these other woke buzzwords that are being thrown around in the industry, is that there's no clear, coherent definition for them. Because at least if there was, even if the definition was dumb, if it was clear and consistent, at least we can debate it. We would all be on the same page about what it means. Maybe there is some useful application for it, but it's just oh, this is just not diverse enough. It's like, well, okay, I'll throw in a few more skin colors and different genitals. All right, fine. Is it diverse? No, not yet. And it's like, well, I don't know. It's so arbitrary and it's constantly shifting.
Well, I mean, and I think about things like the guy who made the Revenant and what is the I like it better, Birdman,
Oh, yeah.
which I love. But he did the Revenant, and the Revenant is almost entirely like one person. Like,
right.
And it's like, how do you meet diversity when you are literally following for the majority of your film? Same thing with Castaway,
right.
One person.
Right.
Like, no matter what you chose, you literally have no diversity because it's one person throughout the entire story. And so to me, I'm sort of like, yeah, the limits on creativity in ways that writers understand. I think when we're writing weird narratives, we might distill a movie or a story down to one person or only two people, and even then, like, that's very limited, or no people at all. So it's to us, we understand that this is ridiculous.
Yes.
But I don't know that audiences necessarily catch on. Like the not like our audience probably gets it. They probably get why this is a problem.
Yeah.
Just because, first of all, it makes no sense. But from the people who just like to go to the movies and don't like to think about these kinds of things, don't have concerns over them, I don't think they understand what is happening, that what is going to how this is going to hurt their movie going experience or their TV experience too, because it can happen for we were specifically talking about the Oscars. I assume that a lot of this is also happening for TV shows, that like TV shows are not getting made that don't have diverse audience, diverse casts, which is like, well, again, if your show is like extremely limited in who it follows, or it's follows aliens, like, what are you gonna do?
Right, exactly. I mean, you're right. I think where it's like the casual moviegoer, when they see a trailer for an interesting looking film, they go, "Oh, that looks cool. I'm going to check it out. I want to see how it ends. I want to see how those characters get out of that situation because it looks really funny or really thrilling or really suspenseful." So, and I also think you're right about how they might not fully appreciate, because for them it might be easy for them to assume like, hey, you're a writer, just change the male to a female, big deal. And it's like, yeah, but in my mind I always had the characters being male, or maybe it made sense for me to have it as a male. The creative process is a weird, mysterious thing that you can't really describe. Sometimes you're just going off of gut, not really logic. So it's like, yeah, in my mind as I'm writing this, it just made sense for the main character to be a male or female or white or Asian or whatever. So it's frustrating, and I think that we're starting to see more. I think it'll be slow, but I think we're starting to see some slightly more pushback. The industry will never become conservative or centrist or moderate. I think it will always be very left leaning. But I think at some point we're going to see some even very progressive creators in the industry going, whoa. I was on board up until this point. Like, let's slow down a little bit here.
We've got a question for Super Chat from Pilgrim Medea for $2. Is the pendulum swinging back, i.e. radical feminism? I do see pushback going on. I do see people, because first of all, we're even hearing about it, which is great news. Yeah. We're hearing articles where people say that they don't like it, and not just from something like you know, the what is it, the Daily Wire or whatever. Like
Right.
we're seeing it, or Fox News. We're seeing those comments come out from varied news sources, which I think is good. And so I do think people are going to be pushing back. And also, I think one of the reasons why people are going to start pushing back is because the content isn't actually good.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, it's no secret that Hollywood is focusing on agenda over art, over orthodoxy, orthodoxy over originality, and we're definitely seeing that a lot in huge, expensive movies. But it's clear that it was meant to push an agenda rather than just entertain an audience. And it's like it's funny because a few years ago I was very frustrated with what I thought, and I still think that I still think this to an extent, that Hollywood's biggest problem was the lack of originality. But now I'm like, I prefer dumb, stupid, agendaless movies over woke, condescending, lecturing movies now. It's like, no, fine. I'll watch Fast and Furious 97 as long as it's just explosions. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm fine with that. But don't tell me that I'm bad because I'm a male or because I'm straight or whatever.
Well, to me, one of my issues though with this whole representation in the content itself is, say, like Beverly wrote in chat, I'm going to show it. Most characters I write are white, and she's not. And I write a lot of male characters myself. Like that is very common for me to write male main characters. Yeah. So and then there's in the gaming industry, to take it a little off topic, but Amy Hennig is a big gaming writer. Like she wrote narrative, and she's one of the minds behind Uncharted and the Legacy of Kain content. And she's not big on women in those stories. And right. Uncharted, he was a white male, straight, but she was ousted because of Uncharted didn't have like diversity to it, but she was their diversity. Like, right. To me, I'm sort of like, are you firing literal like people of other groups to get your diversity in your content? Right. Because isn't that to me, that seems like a major problem, that you would literally rather fire someone, and they literally did replace her with like a straight white guy for their woke agenda.
Trans Muslim characters though, so that's what's important.
Yeah, exactly. They did it so that he could write the two girls Uncharted game, but it's not like, honestly, it's not worth your time. But I feel like they do that I've seen this like a lot where they're like, this person's not woke enough for us, even though they are actually like what they would consider a minority. Like, right. I imagine like if you wrote a story all about white guys, they might not do it, even though you're Hispanic. Like, I feel like it's the content actually matters more than who's behind the content at this point.
Yeah.
Because
it's I consider it a form of like, it's like street legal prejudice. It's like, oh, you're a creator of this identity, so why aren't you creating characters? You're diverse. You're a female. Why aren't you writing more women characters? I remember this is before I really got involved in culture war stuff, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention, or just wasn't that. Anyway, this is back. It was a video that leaked online, and it was back when Roger Ebert was alive, and this is probably like 2005, maybe early 2000, something like that. But he was at a film festival, and somebody had recorded this. I think I just like on their phone, so it was like really bad quality. But he was at a film festival, and he was in the audience. He wasn't even on the panel, and there was a panel for a film. After they showed the film, and they had the filmmakers come out, and the director, I believe, was Asian, and somebody in the audience got up and got really angry and asked the Asian director, hey, how come the main character of your film wasn't Asian? Like, we need more Asians in films. And Roger Ebert, who I'm a big fan of, he stood up and he said, that's actually racist. Like he's the creator. Let him decide who should be in the film. He's the one who making those shots. If he wants to make a movie that's just a white cast, that's his creative decisions, not yours. If you don't like it, then don't watch it. And so I'm glad that Roger Ebert, stuck up on behalf of that. But yeah, it's weird. It's this stupid assumption that that you are sort of relegated to a specific creative lane because by dint of your ethnicity, gender, sexuality, whatever.
Yeah, like I noticed that in the fiction world, it's called own voices.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm like, every time I see something labeled that, I'm like, get it away from me. Like, because it could actually be good. Honestly, it could.
Sure.
But it's got this ideological lens over it that I'm like worried about being preached to, and I don't want to be preached to. Exactly, and I think that's a big, like, maybe that's why tides are turning, is people are like, dude, stop proselytizing and entertain me. And that exists around, I think, every fictive form. People are like, I'm here to be entertained. Yes. And so this is also, you brought up the idea that it's like, it's so focused on the ideology, and so the stories aren't good. And here's the thing where I think about that. Ideology means you think you have all the answers.
Yes.
You can't ask interesting questions that your audience then ponders afterwards. If you then give them these absolute answers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that some of the greatest works of art, including cinema and literature and other creative disciplines as well, I think some of the greatest works of art, the ones that we continue to revere and study and appreciate today, have some ambiguity to them. And I think that might be at least partly due to because of that sort of element of mystery on behalf of the creator's intent, it allows for people to continuously debate and reinterpret it, which is great. But when it's like, my film is about blank, and it's like, okay, cool, then I don't need to ponder over this. I don't need to sleep over it. It's not going to keep me up at night. It's not going to make me want to hit up my friends, like, hey, I want you to watch this movie because I don't know what it's about. I think it's about this, but it might be about that. What do you think? I want to hear your, like, that's not going to happen when you're lecturing me and telling me that I'm privileged and biased.
Well, yeah, and like, here's the thing. Like, say that there's a movie about abortion. Now, there used to be a poet long time ago, like more than 100 years, who wrote about abortion. And a lot of people were confused over whether or not she'd had abortions, or she was pro-abortion or anti-abortion, which meant this was content everyone could read and think about.
Yeah.
Because she didn't actually put her thoughts, her absolute thoughts into this work. It was just about creating questions and making people think about these things and having them think about how they thought about these things. And I feel like that's when it comes to more dramatic work, especially even in movies, like a lot of people think movies are just popcorn and let's have fun. But like, there are a lot of, obviously that's why the Oscars exist. To make serious movies or whatever. But like, but too often though, I'm like, this is Oscar bait. I can see that. But yeah, like, the idea is not supposed to, like, you can have themes, like you can make a movie about abortion, but if at the end of the movie you're basically saying that, there's no question about it morally, you're not actually creating art at that point. You're creating
propaganda.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And you're trying to sway minds to your way of thinking. And I don't think art should do that.
No, I totally agree with you. I think it's a sign of ignorance and arrogance when a work emphasizes the lecture over questions, because the more you know about a subject, the more questions you have about it. So when I watch a film and there's some ambiguity where it's like, oh, I could see it in this way, but I think it might also be all about that as well. Whenever I encounter a movie or a show or even a novel like that, I'm like, okay, this creator dug really deep. They didn't just stick to the surface level and say, okay, this is what I think about this. They dug deep and said, no, this is what confuses me about this, because humans can be like this, but they can also be like that. Or this idea holds true until it encounters this situation. How do we reconcile these things? And so, wow, you dug deep into these subjects, and so I can feel, and so this story will stay with me.
Exactly. I'm not sure that I've seen a movie like that in a while. Maybe Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Sorry, it's such a long title. But the
Right.
Three Billboards movie felt like it actually was not trying to say anything like firm, but really make you think about things.
Yes.
And that felt good, and it felt refreshing to experience that for the first time in a very long time for me, because I watched like so many Oscar bait movies, and that one was Oscar bait clearly, but so many of them just don't really make you think. They just give you an answer, and I disengage, and I feel like that's not what I'm looking for when I'm looking at art.
Right.
And I do think that the Oscar, the real danger of this Oscar representation like layout is an unstated, you need to say the things that this kind of representation is tied to. Otherwise, we're not going to give you an Oscar. That's what I hear when I see that.
Right. Yeah, no, and so getting back to the idea about the artist or the storyteller, taking a firm stance on a specific issue, specifically like a current or political issue, because it's one thing. I mean, there are universal themes that are pretty easy to get most people on the side of, but like when it's a very topical one, that's when you start to roll your eyes at it. But I think I think in addition to arrogance and ignorance, when you watch a film or show and it has a clear political stance, I think it's also cowardice on the part of the creator, because they don't want to ruffle any feathers, and I think it's also cowardice because they're afraid of ambiguity. They're afraid of people misinterpreting their story. And I think, I want to see more creators, embrace ambiguity. Be like, yeah, I said what I need to say on this. Now it's up to you to interpret it. And I don't care if you get way off. I said it. I'm done. But that's a difficult thing for a lot of artists to do. But of course, it's cowardice when it comes to, as much as I want this film to be about this, the studio's putting a lot of money into it, and Oscar season's coming up. The film's going to be released on Christmas, right during Oscar season. So yeah, I guess I'll change the gender or the sexuality of the character, blah blah blah. So.
Yeah, I'm more looking forward to, like, if we're talking about serious films that would normally be Oscar bait, what the indie market is doing, because like I like those, like something like Iris Goes West, which is older at this point, but asks an interesting question about social media and our consumption of it and our obsession with it. And how it affects mental health and all those things. Like, it really brings up a lot of really serious issues with today, and doesn't give me an answer on it, really. And in fact, at one point, it's like, whoa, because to me, I'm sort of like, I'm on the stance that technology, including social media, is as good or as bad as the person wielding it. And if you have some mental or emotional failings, it will blow them up. But that's still on you to control those, to my mind. Like I have anxiety. Like, being on social media sometimes is painful for me, but it's like, that's not social media. That's me still. So to me, I'm sort of, but like, that movie really brought to light a lot of like really serious questions and thoughts about how, like, in influencers too, and the authenticity of people who have a lot of followers and stuff. It had a lot of really interesting questions and stuff. And to me, I feel like we're not getting a lot of that kind of content from like Warner Brothers or, Lucasfilm, Disney, these big ones. I don't feel like they're doing it anymore. Like, even for their big blockbusters, that, oh my God, those were obvious, years ago, almost 10 years ago now. It was like
Right.
check marks on that marketing list of
Yeah.
hiring certain cast members. Like Rogue One, I literally went through it and I was like, look at this. It's clear the marketing team went through it and said, make sure you hire this person of this, race and this race, and make sure you hire this many women. Like it was very obvious to me. And so I think it hit blockbusters first, and then Oscars are like, well, we want you to do it, and because of ideology, like from somewhat from a marketing perspective, I get it, because you want to attract those audiences. Like if you're, but that's not an ideology thing. That's a marketing, trying to get your hit all your sectors. But when it comes to this, you cannot make art that does not include everyone. Oh, that's insidious to me.
Right. And my big worry is that it'll unintentionally make movies and TV shows less diverse, because every single one is equally will be equally diverse. And it's just sort of like, well, it's like the cast of every movie will look like, a stock photo or like an advertisement for Target, where it's like, okay, yeah, we got the black, we got Asian and white, and blah, blah. And we're just like, I don't want to see this. I remember there's back when Marvel had that partnership with Netflix, and they had Daredevil and things like that, Jessica Jones. I remember when Luke Cage came out, there was it wasn't a huge controversy, but I do remember that there was a minor thing about it where people were bothered by the lack of diversity in Luke Cage, the show, which is weird. So for people who don't remember, who are not familiar with it, he's a black character. He's been around since the 70s. And the show was primarily took place and was set in Harlem, in New York City, which is predominantly black. So it makes perfect sense for most of the cast members to be black. But like people were complaining about the lack of diversity. So it just seems like, it's like you would think that would be seen as a win for diversity. Say, hey, look, we got a show that's primarily black focused. Isn't that great? It's like, no, that's not diverse enough. And it's like, well, what the fuck do you mean by diversity then?
I know. I don't think they can actually be satisfied when they're literally talking about that. And here's the thing too, is that one of my thoughts is that as a company, a big company that produces a lot of different content all the time, I don't think everything you produce needs to hit every audience.
Yes, right.
Like, I think you can say, we're mainly trying to attract urban African Americans with Luke Cage. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I think that's like, because honestly, marketing is not content creation. It is actually, we have content in front of us. What is the audience that best will enjoy this? Like, that is what marketing is. Yeah. And the content already exists. So to me, Luke Cage already existed, and they made Luke Cage, and it's gonna mostly hit in Black Americans. That's who's gonna care about it. Right. And that's not a bad demographic to go after.
Right.
But it will also hit just comic book fans.
Yeah.
Who are pretty diverse, honestly, ethnically. But yeah, like this idea that each bit of your content has to hit every audience. It's like, no, you can have content aimed at an audience. Like, you can market to that audience, and then you have something else that is going to market to a different audience. Like you do not have to hit everything. And it's that whole thing where you can't please everybody all the time. Like, don't try to do this. It's crazy. Now, I do sometimes worry about like the backswing of this. Like, are we gonna go? Because there's a lot on the right about anti-depravity kind of stuff, and I don't want that to disappear from art either. Like, I think that's just as bad to me as going, well, we want everyone to be a different color, essentially. Like,
yeah, exactly.
They're not crayons, but like I feel like any kind of limit you put on the artist is going to be a problem, essentially.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I haven't seen too many movies made by outwardly conservative Christian types, but like I'll watch the trailers on occasion, and it's like, oh, it's just so obvious what the movie's about. It's overly patriotic, and it's overly, so it's like it's just as bad. Like I don't care for that either. But yeah, it's weird because I think that movies can be such a great source of unity for audiences. When a movie comes out and there's no agenda, but it's just fun. It doesn't even have to be intelligent. It just be fun. Has some funny quotable lines and some great action scenes, whatever. Like that can bring a lot of people together because like nobody's bickering about the skin color or the agenda. It's just that was a fun movie. It's a great diversion. It's a great diversion from politics. But it's so funny. I mean, I'm sure you've seen Team America, World Police.
Yeah, I have.
There's that line where all the celebrities are gathered around, and they're like, "Yeah, it's our job to read the newspapers and then repeat them on TV like it's our own opinions." It's so strange that that so many of these celebrities in Hollywood think that they have their fingers on the pulse of society, like they know exactly what the average moviegoer, what the average audience member wants.
I think the average audience member just wants to be entertained. That is my thought. Like I think they just want some laughs. They want a plot that is, decent.
Right.
Like to me, I'm sort of like just reach mediocrity first. Just hit that line, please, and then try to push your script a little further. Like I felt like The Last Jedi, like they literally started filming that after one draft, and I was like, oh, the lack of professionalism of that alone was that hurt to even hear it, especially with the amount of money going behind that movie. Like, and it was like, and then when it was such a failure among Star Wars fans, I was sort of like, what did you expect?
The critics loved it though, so
Oh yeah, that was it. Oh God. And then they use the block. They use the shield of you didn't like it because you're a misogynist or whatever. They like to use that shield of it's racism, it's sexism. That's why you don't like it. It's not because we suck. It's because you do.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up. So not too many people know this, but sort of the I guess the genesis of the Reckless Muse, because before the podcast it was and still is a publication on Medium, and so I started that a few years ago. This is when I was unemployed, so I was just writing random Medium articles, just kind of seeing which ones would do well. And the first one that did really well for me was criticizing the Charlie's Angels reboot from a few years ago. I think it was Elizabeth Banks. She directed that, and so that movie flopped. It had Kristen Stewart and had a few other famous people, and Elizabeth Banks, who has done more acting, but she's been getting into directing recently. But anyway, the movie came out and it was a flop, and so I did an article just criticizing her response, because she said that I can't remember exactly what she said, but it was she was blaming the industry for not caring about female-led action movies. And also blaming fans, where it's like, oh, fans just don't want to see action movies with women. It's like, okay, Wonder Woman, like I'm pretty sure that like the audience was mostly men, or at least pretty evenly split. The Terminator movies, Aliens, there are a lot. Most of them Star Wars movies. Yeah. Like there are actually like sure, like action is a genre that's mostly male dominated, but there have been a lot of hit action movies that had women in leading roles in it. So to me, it's just a lack of accountability. Like, I would have more respect for if she just said, I'm proud of the movie. It didn't resonate with audiences, but I'm happy with it. I was like, okay, you're standing by your work. Cool. But to blame the audience, like that's like a comedian yelling at the audience for not getting their jokes. And it's just like, come on, man. Like, the fault is yours.
Yeah. When I remember when she did that, one of the things she said that I remember first of all, there was an article that came out before it came out that said, like, men, this movie isn't for you.
Yes.
And then from the same publication, oh, why aren't men going to see the new Charlie's Angels movie? Maybe because you told them it wasn't for them. Like, you literally told them before it came out not to go see it. Like, I don't know why.
Yeah, I know. It's so weird. Feminists really don't understand men, and I say feminists, not women, because there are plenty of women who I think have a decent understanding of why men would react to certain things and whatnot. But I remember, I think it was like the second article that I wrote that eventually led to the Reckless Muse. I was criticizing the critical. Sorry, man, that's some good lemonade. It was Little Women. That movie had come out, and I remember
Which
there was some.
version?
Yeah, it was from like 2018, I think. It was.
Okay.
Yeah, that movie had just come out, and there was a film critic for one of the main legacy publications, but she tweeted out that there was like a pandemic of men who were refusing to watch Little Women. And she goes, I've several recommendations, but yet none of the men who I know want to see the movie. It's like, first of all, it's why are you surprised that men aren't flocking to see a movie called Little Women? Like, I mean, it's like, yeah, I want to.
I don't even want to see it.
I know. And then there were so many journalists and critics who were talking about why men need to see the movie because like it would make them understand women and the patriarchy. It's like, I don't want, like, men hate being nagged. Why would I pay money to see a movie to get nagged? It's just like, there are so many layers. There's so many reasons for men not to watch the movie. And yet, like, they were just absolutely flabbergasted that men were not flocking to see this movie. It's like, it's not even about adult women. It's about young, like, little women. Like, what is your problem? It was so weird.
Well, God, that kind of reminds me, and I've mentioned this before, but there was a book club I was in where a guy ran it, and he constantly made us read coming of age stories for women, like women, like modern day Little Women kind of stories, and I got tired of them.
Yeah.
And he's one of his justifications for when he chose one was that I was never a little girl, and I'm like, yeah, well, you know what, I was. Oh. I don't need to read this, okay?
Right.
And like, to me, I'm like, I don't want someone to tell me the same story 10,000 times.
Right.
You know? Right. Like, and there is a lot of repetition right now in stories, I would say. Like, it's like, oh, this movie is almost exactly the same as this other movie. It covers the exact same themes, has almost exactly the same kind of cast layout, and comes to the same conclusions. And this is really annoying. Like, no one wants to, like, I don't want to watch the same movie more than, like, I will watch the same movie more than once. I don't want to say that I don't repeat, because I definitely do.
Right.
But I don't want to be sold a new movie that is actually not a new movie. Same thing with novels. I don't want to read again what I've essentially already read. And with these representation rules and the ideology thing, I think we're going to keep seeing that until there's more pushback on it. Right. And it was kind of funny with the Elizabeth Banks thing. She had said something about people don't want to see this, but they want to see like 27 different Spider-Man movies.
Right.
And it's like sequels, I think she said specifically. And it's like, well, they're not actually sequels, all of them. And this is more about Sony keeping the rights to Spider-Man than it is anything else. Also, Spider-Man is a huge title, but it's much bigger than Charlie's Angels.
Right, exactly.
Much bigger.
Yeah, and it always cracks me up that the more feminist, activist-oriented, creators and filmmakers in Hollywood, whenever they try to promote something that is female-oriented to the general audience, so often it's like it's leftovers from other existing properties. So it's like, let's take a male character that exists, in the novel, but let's make them female. Or let's take Charlie's Angels because we don't have any other stories to come up with about female spies. So let's just take an existing. And it's like, I don't think you realize that what you're basically doing here, what you're implying here, is that women aren't good enough for original stories. And I don't believe that. But it's demonstrative of like the laziness of like, how about instead of just rehashing the same story and over again, how about we come up with a different approach to making a secret agent movie where the lead is a female or the team is a female.
That makes me think again of The Long Kiss Goodnight, which is one of my favorite action movies. Like,
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, G.A. Davis,
yeah. When it would, back when I had cable or satellite, if it was on, it was what I was watching, like, because that's how much I enjoyed it. And it's kind of a weird take on kind of the Jason Bourne idea, I would
Yeah.
say, because
Yeah.
the books came out, but it's not exactly the same as the books either. It's like very different. Like
Yeah.
the fact that she's a woman actually matters in that story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like to me, I feel like it is its own thing. Like sure, I mean, spies losing their memory, that's as close as similar as it gets, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
But like beyond that, it's much it's and it's also cool and interesting, and I love Gina Davis throughout it. I think
Yeah.
it's a really fun movie.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of the problem here with ideology in movies is that they're trying to rewrite history to say that movies like The Long Kiss Goodnight never existed.
Right. Right.
Or that TV shows like Xena never existed. Like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
never had strong female characters before.
Right.
And we need them now, and we need them by recreating Spider-Man as a woman or whatever.
Right.
And my problem with that is that it's like, I don't need to see Spider-Man as a woman, like, because I could go watch like some of the old stuff, but they don't want you to watch the old stuff, because not just because they're not going to be making money on it, but also, this is important, it doesn't follow the ideology.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's that sort of myopic view of history that's so prevalent with the sort of modern woke mindset of like, let's ignore all of the decades of progress that we've had in our society and in culture, and pretend that it was only a couple of years ago that we started talking about equality for the races and for the sexes. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, and look, let's try to be fair, because historically women and minorities and LGBTQ folks have been largely left out of pop culture. But I mean, that's we've had decades of progress. Like, instead of looking back and feeling cynical, like, let's get excited. Like, hey, like, that's cool. Like, Eddie Murphy was one of the highest paid actors of the 80s. Like, that was before we were even born. He was one of the biggest stars of all time. So like, let's not pretend that diverse groups and diverse talent didn't get the limelight. Like, it's been.
Lucille Ball was one of the most successful people in Hollywood.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, come on. Like, it's crazy. She owned her own production company.
Yeah.
She greenlit some movies that were just amazing. So to me, I'm sort of like, what are you talking about? That, we haven't made, like, about time. That's the phrase I keep hearing. About time. It's about time that we stand up for women and minorities and LGBT in Hollywood. And I'm like, what do you mean about time?
Yeah.
What was that movie that starred Tom Hanks, that it's about the guy who got fired for having AIDS? So, like,
Philadelphia.
Yeah. That's old.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm sort of like, what are you talking about time? And they keep doing this with Disney. Disney has their first gay character in a movie. Disney has their first every year. It's their first gay character.
Yeah. It's so here's the thing, like the idea of having more diverse characters in movies, like, that alone does not bother me. It's if studios focus more on the quality of the story, then the cast can be as diverse as they want, because the audiences won't care. It's like you would have to be a bigot to be like, yeah, that was a good movie, but the main character was black, therefore I don't like it. It's like, no, you'd have to be a bigot to do that. You're just as much of a bigot if you say that was a good movie, but why did they cast a white man in the lead? It's like, yeah, like, only a bigot would focus on the surface characteristics of a cast member. But it seems like, it's not enough simply to like, hey, let's there will be a gay couple in the movies. Okay, sure, fine, I'll do that. But it's like, there always has to be an announcement, like, oh, like, this series has its first gay character. It's like, if you just did it and you just made it part of the story, nobody would notice, nobody would care. And like, if anything, that would probably be more genuinely progressive. Like, that would encourage more people to be like, oh yeah, that's normal, no big deal, whatever.
But keep writing articles about it.
Exactly. Yeah. Something is like, studios have an opportunity to have their cake and eat it too. They can be diverse without alienating audiences, without doing the whole pandering thing and condescending and lecturing and everything. They're doing everything wrong possible.
Well, yeah, and I say this, like, Precious, that movie came out before a lot of the ideological changes in Hollywood like really ramped up.
Yeah.
And it's like a completely black cast, and it is just amazing. That movie is so damn good. And it has, but I don't think it would be greenlit now because of the fact that it doesn't actually, like, I think like they want black stories, but they want black stories of excellence, or they want stories about black versus white people. Like they want that adversarial nature, and there's none of that. And they said the same thing about Zora Neale Hurston's books when she was writing during the original Harlem Renaissance period. She did not write about white people like at all, and like, you know, like Langston Hughes and W. Du Bois were like, oh, she's not really part of the Renaissance because she's just writing about black people interacting with black people. They had a problem with her just writing about the black experience isolated. And it's and to me that feels like really cruel. Like why, like, and I feel like that is what they would say about Precious now. That it's like, or, you know, or they'll have to put some weird thing on it, like it's all because of redlining or whatever, you know. You know.
And here's the thing, you know, it's actually, there are ways to creatively justify diversity in a film. So to give a personal example, so I have a degree in music. And I've always loved classical music. And when I first started getting into screenwriting, I wrote a short script, not really intending to do anything with it, just a fun little idea I had. I had this idea of a classical pianist, an acclaimed classical pianist who was also a serial killer. Kind of a Hannibal Lecter type who was very charming and intelligent, but also, you know, kind of maniacal. And so the script was just one scene, and he had like this weird, crazy like obsession with eliminating mediocrity. So if he had students that he thought weren't practicing, he would kill them. I know it's a silly premise, but you know, I was, again, just me having fun. And so the scene was him, and he's talking to a student who's female. But then, like, for me, I was like, I don't know. Like, I've seen this scene so many times of like a male serial killer, and then like the helpless female tied to a chair. So I switched the genders, not for feminist reasons, but simply because I thought it would be interesting, and because, you know, I know this is controversial to say, because men and women are different. I changed the character. I didn't just like swap genders and that was it. Like I rewrote her dialogue, so it would be more believable as a female. And it ended up being better. Like, I like the idea of, because there were so few characters where it's like she's a female and she's also got like this obsessive aspect to her, and she's a serial killer. It's like, I haven't seen that combination in too many characters. It's usually men who are obsessive and blah blah blah. And so to me, like, the script ended up being better. Again, and there was nothing about gender involved. It's simply changing the gender also forced me to change her motivations and her character. So there are ways to justify, I think, not defaulting to a white male for as the lead in a story, but that requires work. And you know, that's it's much easier to simply say, let's just swap the races, let's just swap the genders, and that's it, and call it a day. And it's like, okay, but this feels so tacked on. Like, if you're gonna have a story, that involves a gay character or a trans character or a disabled character, or can be like, okay, like I'm going to understand what it's like for this character, for a person in this situation, and I'm going to integrate that into the story so it feels authentic. But it's just sort of Band-Aid approach. Like, let's just tack it on, and there we're diverse.
Yeah. Well, I know, like, something like Salt. Salt was originally written for a male lead, and then they gave it to Angelina Jolie.
Yeah.
And I would think in the movie making process that she would take part in making the character more authentic. I mean, I think that's what actors are supposed to be doing,
right?
Which is why they question scripts, and I'm totally cool with that. I think that's actually a good aspect of film, is that it's like, it's more, and I used to playwright like a lot, and like if I was involved in a production, if someone had feedback or something, like as an actor, like, this feels more natural, I'm like, okay, cool, like, and I think about it, and I'm like, and I usually ended up agreeing with them. And that's not to say that I'm a pushover too, because I have disagreed with directors and stood firm, which to me was a little different. But yeah, like, I feel like there are instances where there's swapping going on that are not necessarily bad. Like Lethal Weapon, they did not write Murtaugh as a black guy in the original script.
Oh, really?
That was not the plan.
Yeah.
But then they hired Danny Glover, and it's like awesome. It's so awesome. It created the trope of the white and guy and black guy best friend buddies.
Right.
You
Right. The
know?
buddy cop thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it created some really great opportunities from a writing perspective, because then they did the second movie, and it really delved into some of the ideas that they had to deal with as him being African American. And so to me, I feel like like sometimes changing things up can be beneficial to you. Like,
Yes.
you know, because that's why sometimes I write from a male perspective.
Right.
It is not my perspective.
Right. Right.
And so I have to really think about it and do something different, and it makes me write differently. And I think that's good. I want to be stretched as a writer. I want my skills to be stretched. And I don't think I get that by writing as myself. Like, you know, like what's his name? Jeff Vandermeer almost always writes from a female perspective. Like he often does. Like the movie, they made the movie Annihilation based on his book by the same guy.
Right.
Yeah, and he wrote from a female perspective, and a lot of people, when they read it, sometimes they say she doesn't actually feel like a woman. And I was like, she does feel like a woman, just a very different one, very much more similar to me than the average woman.
Right.
And there's that that subreddit that is about men writing about women.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they're always making fun of men for how they write about women.
Yeah.
Always. That's the point. And sometimes I'm like, God, shut up. Like I think it was one of the moments that led to me getting off Reddit entirely, there was this point where they brought up Gabriel Garcia Marquez, where there's a scene where two Colombian women in the backwoods of Colombia who are cousins, and it's like 50 years ago. They are bathing each other naked, and they're like, no woman would do this. And I was like, I think a Colombian man that was alive then knows more what Colombian women did then than you as an American woman today knows what those women did. And I was like, that's just like ethnocentric, and like this idea that culture wouldn't come into it. Come on, that's just silly.
It's terrible too, that because of the ideology, it's forcing a lot of people are judging stories in the most superficial ways. It's not about the story. It's about, it's about superficial reasons like that. So this is kind of related to that. So I'm sure you heard about Laura Dern and Sam Neill talking about the age difference in Jurassic Park.
Oh yeah. Which I've said this before, but I was honestly shocked that she was as young as she was in Jurassic Park. Even still looking back at it, I'm sort of like, she was in her early 20s. I seriously thought she was in her 30s.
Yeah, me too. And if anything, I think that's just a testament of how good of an actress she is. Like, she came off as much more like a veteran, paleontologist or ethnobotanist or whatever she was.
Yeah.
But it's like, she did not come off. Paleobotanist. She did not come off as like a 23-year-old girl, like right out of college. Like she came off as a seasoned professional. So. And also in that interview, she was talking about patriarchy. Oh, like, like that wouldn't fly today because of our understanding of patriarchy. It's like, why is this being brought up in a conversation about a movie about dinosaurs? Like, why these things, like the movie? Yeah, it's just so strange, like that we're letting ideology get in the way of us simply enjoying a movie. Because there are going to be a lot of Gen Xers who read that and go, yeah, Jurassic Park is a problematic movie these days. And it's like, oh,
what do you mean?
Like,
do you mean?
I'm sorry, Gen Z.
These.
Yeah.
I don't think Gen X is Gen.
No. I wouldn't be surprised if Gen Z comes along and is like, oh yeah, Jurassic Park is a problematic movie these days because of the power differential between Sam Neill and Laura Dern. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, it's a movie about dinosaurs.
I know. Well, then this is a comment someone made about when we were talking about gender switching characters. Female Starbuck by JB. Female Starbuck in the new Battlestar Galactica improved the story. So say we all. I absolutely agree with that. 100%. that there was a lot of drama and tension and storyline added by the fact that she was a woman, like, and it, versus like, you know, diametrically to Apollo. Like it actually added a lot. And it made me really interested. Also, it was played by Katie Sackhoff, who's pretty good. So I was like, this is a good change. And you can reach changes like that. And then I think Beverly mentioned, Beverly, Mary Tyler Moore was only like 25 compared to Dick Van Dyke's 37, which is only a 12-year difference.
Right.
Which I do not consider to be too large for people who are in a romantic relationship.
Right.
But I've noticed feminists complain about that before, the age difference. Like if a man is with a woman who is a lot younger, that is sometimes they even like refer to it as like pedophilia or whatever. And like even if she's 18, they like put it on that same level. And I'm like, it's not like, and this is the thing that's really insidious about that all, is that they keep taking away the agency of the woman.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Right. Yeah, that's the thing about getting back to the Jurassic Park thing. Like that didn't play into the plot at all. It's not like it didn't seem like it was mentioned that Sam Neill's character was much older and more powerful than her, and that he was dating a student or something like that. Like there was nothing about it at all. It just seemed like they were colleagues.
Yeah. I didn't honestly, their romantic entanglement isn't even all that obvious in the movie. Like it's more obvious later on when it's like, oh, she's married to someone else and she wasn't still with him, and that was a thing. And I was like, really? They were like together in the first movie? Like that wasn't like really in your face that they had even a romantic relationship. They were at a dig together because they were both, you know, in paleontology, like, so they were colleagues, and there was nothing where they said she was a student, like none of that. I assume she had a PhD, like that's where I was when I watched that movie, and it's still there. I don't know why anyone would think just because the actress was 23 years old that meant she was a student or young. Like people play different ages all the time in movies.
And
like
it's about the ages. They're making a big deal about the ages of the actors, and again, they were adults. Like it's, I don't know what else. Like, why is this a problem at all? Like, why are we focusing on this rather than the legacy of the movie?
Like it dramatically advanced CGI at the time. Like it was pretty big. In that regard, and actually, I think it made improvements on the book. I get lambasted by Michael Crichton fans for that, but he's not perfect.
It did cut out a lot of intestines being ripped out of people, though. So
well, they were trying to make a PG-13 movie or whatever. So I'm not a huge fan of PG-13, but I know it's studios love it, and I find that to be a limit artistically as well. That has been around for a very long time now. That goes beyond ideology.
Being a fan of horror, there are very few PG-13 horror films that I like. It's weird. It's so obvious that certain things needed to be truncated or cut out, and it feels so forced. Where it's like, oh, like we can't show much nudity, but we can show a naked woman from behind, and we're going to make sure that the camera is strategically placed. Or somebody's going to get decapitated, but we're only going to show the knife coming down and then cut away. And it's like it just feels so forced. It's like show me all of it or show me none of it. But PG-13 is like, oh, we're going to walk right up to the line, but then cut back. I don't know. It just feels so neutered.
I bring it up all the time because it still is in my brain. Is in Disney's Black Panther when Killmonger slices the throat of one of the female guards, and to me, I was like, they didn't cut away.
Right.
Which I would have probably been okay with.
Sure.
But so they didn't cut away, and then it's absolutely bloodless.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that just really took me out of the movie. Like, my God. There was a lot wrong with that movie, though. I have like a 12-minute what's wrong with that movie video on my channel.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do. Like, and how I would have rewritten it because I felt like it was so poorly written.
Yeah.
Like, I think that movie, like, I know a lot of people really loved it and
Uh-huh.
everything, but there's just, I feel like Black Panther, literally the character in that movie,
Mm.
has no agency. Like,
Right, right,
throughout which to me is like a huge writing problem if your protagonist is not really a major agent of his movie. Like, come
right,
on.
right.
But like, there were points where people got mad at him where he could have said something and he didn't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is he silent right now? Like, I don't like, and I don't get his motivation for being quiet at this moment. Like, he could just literally open his mouth and defend himself reasonably, and
Right.
it would probably work. Like, I don't get it. And
Right.
so, like, there were so many points like that. And then I was like, there are too many people in this goddamn movie. That was my other problem with it. I was like, I don't care about most of them. Like, okay, so here's something. They added that character played by the Bilbo Baggins guy, Martin
Oh yeah.
Freeman.
Yeah.
And I was like, cut him from the movie. And
Right,
and
right.
I'm like, I know he's just there because you want a white guy in the movie. I don't need him. Everything he does could be done by someone else,
Right,
and
right.
and they don't even need to be, that faction doesn't even need to be represented in this movie. And it's
Right.
like, do you know, that would literally be an improvement story wise and make it less diverse.
Right, right. So I really enjoyed that movie until my friend pointed out that it was basically just The Lion King.
Yep, it is.
And I was like, oh, okay, all right, yeah, okay.
It kind of sucks.
Which they still remade.
Yeah, they did. Then they remade it. Yeah.
Oh
But
man.
yeah, I have a serious problem with a lot of the like, not only are they like doing the marketing thing where they're like, we want to, like, honestly, that character in Black Panther, he's there for a marketing reason, not
Yeah.
really an ideological one, but a marketing one.
Mm.
And then there's all the marketing that goes into like a lot of the big scripts beforehand. Like,
Yeah.
they're like, no, we got to make sure, like, even though the story might not work
Mm-hmm.
that way as well. And then there's the ideology now that they're pushing in all these movies. Like, girl power is a huge one.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, stop it. I think I said in something I wrote once, stop pandering to my genitals. They can't enjoy a movie.
Oh
And
man.
I know that's not kind, but it's kind of
Well,
true.
I mean, and here's the thing: like, these initiatives are expensive. Like, they're millions, if not tens of millions of dollars. Like, they have whole departments dedicated to diversity and inclusion, and it's like, for what? And like, I'm practically begging the studios to have me consult for them for their diversity and inclusion. No, give her the whole department. Just give me $50K a year. I don't care. That's good enough. Like, I will fix your diversity and inclusion problem. And I use the term problem lightly because I mean, like, because whenever I hear the term problem within these woke contexts, like, yeah, is that really a problem? Like, like, to get away from Hollywood for a second. I think I mentioned before that I used to work for a startup in Silicon Valley, and so there was always there was a lot of talk about the pipeline problem, right? Why there were so few female engineers. So yeah, is that a problem though? Like, there are very few women graduating with degrees in engineering. Is that a problem? Like, there are very few men in early education. There are very few men in the fashion industry. Why is that not seen as a problem? But,
We're all the straight men in fashion design. Wait a minute. We got a problem here.
But it's there are other ways, I think, that they're more effective, but and also cheaper ways of increasing of bringing in wider a wider berth of talents into the industry. It's like, why isn't this money that you're spending on diversity and inclusion programs and initiatives, why aren't you putting that towards scholarships or towards arts programs or like underfunded schools? That's a long-term thing, but like like, that could probably go a long way towards helping people from poorer areas, many of whom are minorities, get into the industry, get inspired to go out and create something. But no, it's just a few months ago, Ben and I we did an episode on this. The Hollywood Reporter hosted a big luncheon with Gina Davis, and it was about the diversity and inclusion initiatives in Hollywood. And they're talking about like all the progress we've made, but how all the work that needs to go into all the work that still needs to get done. And it's like that luncheon was so fucking expensive, why didn't you go out and, like, volunteer at a school for a day? Like, go out and,
Most
and
of the,
inspire young people to create. It was insane.
honestly, because it's virtue signaling.
Yeah.
That they're trying to say we need to do something about this while they eat their $200 plate lunch.
In Beverly Hills, yeah.
And yeah, and so while they get photographed, so that they can say that they're trying to do something, and then they're like, we put all this money to our diversity and inclusion department to show that we actually care about this, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, you don't. Like, you
Yeah.
literally don't. This is essentially like an ESG tax dodge shit going on,
Right.
and like, I don't believe you.
Right.
Which is why, like, a lot of some progressives actually see through it and actually are like, I don't buy your bullshit. Like, I have seen progressives say that they're like, I don't want your token bullshit on your shitty movies. Okay, like, either make a real story about people who I care about, or screw off. I don't care. And I mean, that's fair, because it's inauthentic. It is completely inauthentic.
It is. And just because I have the article open here about that luncheon, they opened the event with what do you call it? Like an air of acknowledgement, land acknowledgement.
The land acknowledgement bullshit at the beginning.
I will say though that the person who did it, they have a cool name, Crystal Echo Hawk. That's a pretty cool name. And then the other person is Bird Running Water. So, they open the event by paying respects to the Tongva people, who are the ancestral custodians of the land that we are gathered on today, and acknowledge that the Chumash and Tataviam tribes, who are also traditional keepers of the land out on the coast and in the valley, respectively, lands where many of our entertainment community live and work. It's like, yeah, but you're hosting this event at the Mayborn Beverly Hills Hotel. So, like...
Yeah, it's totally, they don't even see how much of a joke they are half the time. Like, I think most of us who are like into this stuff are like, you either get mad or you laugh about it. Like, I want to laugh about it because I'm like, I feel like that's more painful to them than me getting angry, honestly. If I make fun of them, because then I'm not taking them seriously. Because there's no reason to take these idiots seriously. They are grifters. They are dumb, and they're just pushing their ideology onto onto their audiences. But the problem is that the audiences have more options now.
Yes.
Like, they have, with streaming, like, and with indie markets being bigger since streaming started, it's a lot harder for them. Like, and then a lot of people stopped going to the movie theater like for years and years ago, and then literally stopped going to the movie theater when they closed the theaters. And some of them did not go back, like just didn't. And it's like, you're losing your audiences like over time. And I keep saying it, I don't get it, why you want to buy an IP and then change everything about it, that people who, you bought the IP because it has an established audience. And then you told the established audience that you're going to change everything and that their opinions no longer mattered. Why are you then surprised that the established audience that you bought the IP for decides not to watch your content?
Right, exactly. Well, it's toxic fandom. Yeah, and then when it doesn't do well, or it's toxic fandom, that's the problem. And it's like, oh, come on. Like, that's such a fuck you to all the fans out there who, like, I've been reading this comic book series or this novel series ever since I was a kid. And I was so thrilled when it got the big budget treatment, and then you change the gender and the sexuality and the ethnicity of the character. And it's like, yeah, like this property's been around for years, maybe decades, and you're surprised that audiences are pissed off about these, and also very superficial and needless changes. It's obvious it's to check off boxes. It's not like, well, we thought we would change this character and then for narrative reasons or for thematic reasons, which, I mean, I think it's still kind of silly, but I can at least understand that thinking. But it's like, no, it's just to check off the boxes. It's for no other reason, really.
Well, I know they made in Dune, the Dune movie that came out, and I'm saying Dune, right, because it's very similar to saying Doom.
Yeah.
But Dune, the new Dune movie,
Yeah.
they changed the race of kinds so that they could hire Zendaya to play Chiani.
Right.
And I'm like, my problem with kinds in that movie is that they took away all of the badassery of that character
Right.
and all the things that made kinds interesting. And I was like, you could have kept all of that
Yeah.
if she
Yeah.
was a black woman. Like, you didn't have, but I don't know why you just nerfed her so hardcore.
Right.
And then they also, like, I saw an article about the movie that they're like, Zendaya is only in 4.5 minutes of Dune. And I'm like, that's not the complaint you should be making. The complaint you should be making is that Jessica is a weakling in the movie compared to how she is in the book. That
Right.
if you want to make a feminist claim, which actually has a backup, of something of interest,
Right.
that is more, important. The fact that Jessica is way less interesting in that movie than she ever was in the book. And
Right.
so often they just miss things like that.
I remember an article came out talking about how little Zendaya was paid, but like because I think she only filmed for like 10 days or something like that. But when you look at the amount she was making per day, I mean, it's like you could buy a house for each day of filming. Like a day's salary could buy a house. I mean, like it was like
she was, I think it was like underpaid.
I know, it's like, yeah, well, she was barely in the movie, and she still got paid like $500,000 for the role. I don't what for a couple of weeks worth of work.
Yeah, that is insane to me.
Maybe
like I
Hollywood
would
should not be
love
lecturing
to
us.
fail that hard.
Yeah,
like, let them abuse me like that. I'll take it. I'll take one for the team. $500,000 for 10 days of work. I'll do it.
Yeah, the lack of self-awareness in Hollywood is insane. I remember when during the early stages of the pandemic, when lockdowns were first going into effect, particularly here in the U.S., Brie Larson, I think she started a YouTube channel, and I remember I watched the first couple of minutes of her intro video, and they're super cringy. It was just like, hey everyone, I'm Brie Larson, and for my channel I'm going to be having inclusive content and anti-racist rhetoric. And it's like, yeah, we're in the middle of a pandemic. That's what I want, and I can't leave my house. That's what I want to go. That's what's going to take up my time. Like that's the thing that's going to keep me sane during the pandemic.
No,
a millionaire tweeting and making videos from her mansion about how someone who can't leave my house, need to be less racist. Like, yeah, that's what I'm worried about right now.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's a lot of people who in Hollywood who make a lot of money, who are very, very disconnected to how the rest of us experience our lives, and say really dumb shit, most of it very preachy. Like to me, like earlier it was about go vegan, and I was like, shut up, just shut up. And they're like, Gwyneth Paltrow, if you are ever feeling upset or anxious or sad, go stand on a beach like I do. And I'm like, your private beach? Can I come to your private beach? I'll come there. they all act like that. So I mean, that's why a lot of people are like, that Imagine video was really annoying. Like there was so much of that kind of content, like Nancy Pelosi talking about how she needed her ice cream. Like, we don't give a shit, honey. Like, we want to know what's going on. Like, can we go back to work now? Can we be able to pay our rent and our mortgages? Like, can you focus on that? I don't give a shit if you have ice cream or not. Like, right. And they do that a lot. And Hollywood is really bad about it, because then they think they're so freaking worldly, and it drives me crazy, because I'm like, okay, when was the last time you took out your own trash? Just tell me that.
I remember a few years ago, Anne Hathaway, she won some award. It wasn't like an Oscar or Golden Globe, I don't think, but it was she won some award, and during her acceptance speech, she was talking about how she was going to use her position in Hollywood to fight white privilege, male privilege, and straight privilege. And it's just like, excuse me, like you're wearing like, I don't know, $100,000 dress, maybe more, and you're at a fancy event somewhere in Beverly Hills and surrounded by other millionaires, and you're talking about how you're going to fight privilege.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. I would believe them if they said, I'm going to fight privilege. And then when Disney literally is stealing like the dress designs from the designers from Cruella to make toys and stuff and not giving them a cut of that money, if they actually said, Disney, I'm not going to do any of your projects until you make this right. Like, I would believe them then. But they are not doing that. They will still take a Disney project. And it's like, even though Disney does that, it's like, or like, oh, I won't take another Disney project until they stop being okay with, you know, Chinese slavery. Like, no, they're not. Like, that's why Ricky Gervais made the joke. If ISIS had a streaming service, you'd all call your agents because they don't care. And they preach because they're virtue signaling. And but they don't actually give a shit. That it makes them sleep better at night to preach. But they can't walk the walk, though. They absolutely, like, very few of them even bother. Like, I have seen a couple of them. They're like, yeah, I'm not doing it anymore because of you guys are jerks. Like, I think Anthony Hopkins basically said that Hollywood was toxic and yeeted out. And but very few of them are willing to do that. And then you never hear about it again, obviously, because Hollywood won't change, unfortunately. And I see this Oscar thing as them getting worse. Honestly, I do.
Which and the ratings for the show for the ceremony every year have been going down a lot. I mean, it was pretty big in the 90s. I remember being young, being a kid and even a teenager and loving the Oscars and looking forward to it. But over the last few years, even before it got overtly political, or at least before I started to notice how political it got, I started tuning out. It was just sort of like, yeah, all right, this is getting lame and dumb. And so now there's even less of a reason to watch the Oscars. And you're right about how, you know, a lot of progressives are starting to see through this bullshit as well. So it's like, not only has the Oscars like alienated, you know, conservatives and middle America, you know, it's like it's getting to the point now where even, you know, somebody from Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York is gonna be like, yeah, the Oscars are they're too political now. I wanted to see my movie get celebrated, but there's too many lectures. So yeah, it's at some point they're going to be alienating even their core base. So yeah, I think it's kind of unless they completely like they have to do away with this stuff. It's not just like, oh, we're gonna, you know, push the brakes a little bit. So no, you have to get rid of Aperture 25.
Yes, definitely. Well, I was never into the Oscars. I saw the Oscars once. What happened was a professor in grad school had an Oscars party because he loved the Oscars. And I was like, sure, I'll come. And he even had us like he had pronounced for us to pick like who we thought was going to win and everything. And I can't remember everything I picked, but I wanted Silver Linings Playbook to win. That was the year that came out. But I don't think it did win, but Jennifer Lawrence, that's the year she won the Oscar for it. And I remember that was also the year of Beasts of the Southern Wild. Now, remember, these are all professors and grad school students in the arts at this party. And this one woman was pissed that Jennifer Lawrence won over the little girl from Beasts of the Southern Wild. Absolutely fucking angry. And she said, what did she say? Of course, Little Miss Hunger Games wins. And I was like, you mean the child star of Winter Zone, who was up for an Oscar a few years ago when she was a child? Like, what the hell are you talking about? Do you have notes? Like, I know movies better than you, apparently. Like,
right.
And I was, and like, she's like, it's just a rom-com. And I'm like, you mean this movie about mental illness?
Right.
And finding love through mental illness is just a rom-com. You were like, because Jennifer Lawrence's character is extremely depressed and self-destructive, and Bradley Cooper's character has bipolar disorder. Like, it's he just got out of an asylum for help, for fuck's sake. So to me, I'm sort of like, no, this is not a rom-com. This is not what I expect when I sit down to watch a rom-com. Okay. And I like rom-coms. That wasn't one.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, a lot of people at that party wanted Beast of the Southern Wild to win everything. And I was like, I don't, because that's who that crowd was. And this was in Kansas, by the way. This wasn't in like California. This was Kansas. So I mean, I know I had a date there, and he was rolling his eyes because he was not like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nah, I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
I like these people, but they have some silly ideas.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like a lot of some of this, like, okay, so it's trickling down from the Oscars, but it's also bubbling up from people coming out of the universities, you know, to tie it in there. Because there are screenwriting schools now, and and a lot of these people, they go to these schools and they're trained in these kind of intersectionality and critical race theory and all this stuff. Even back then, there was some of it going on in my Kansas college. So like, and I know it's only gotten worse. So it's like, it's like coming from the top, and it's also coming from the bottom. And I think the problem is that we're losing some writers who maybe didn't go to college necessarily, or didn't go to college for this necessarily, who are really good and have really good ideas that are just not meeting the bullshit.
Right. Yeah, it's there's a Twitter acquaintance of mine who is a college professor who I believe he teaches creative writing, and we had a conversation offline a while back. And he's saying that he's worried that he's seeing his students taking fewer and fewer risks. And yeah, sure, this is creative writing, but I would not be surprised if this was leaking into screenwriting courses and filmmaking classes as well. You know, there's such an activist bent in academia right now that's you know, even the hard sciences can't get away from it. So yeah, and what's sad is that it's still ultimately, I think, a minority of people who are pushing for this, but they're the ones with the cultural megaphone who are shouting from the rooftops that this is what regular people want. You know, like you said, it's a handful of industry people, and then a handful of you know, university students. But there's like this huge gap in the middle who's just going like, yeah, it's just entertain me.
Yeah.
Distract me
or
from.
I just want to, and then from the writer's side, it's like, I just want to write a good story. I just want to write a story that people connect with. Like, come on. And so like, I think it's sad because I feel like we're not getting a lot of really good content right now. Like, there's so much content, and there's content everywhere. It's like overload. You know, they've made more movies than they ever have before. They make more TV shows. There's way more, you know, and they make a TV show for a season, and then you know, that didn't do well, and they close it, and then you know, they cancel it, and then they're like, we're just gonna make another one, and we're gonna make, you know, and it keeps happening. There's content overload, and hardly any of it is really worth watching to me. Like, I feel, and I'm kind of sad about that because I love narrative. I love it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I feel like I have to go to the old stuff. Like, I'm like, I haven't seen this. It's from 10 years ago. Maybe it's good. Let's try it. Like, I'm going backwards in time now to get my entertainment.
Another aspect that worries me about Aperture 25 and the whole, you know, an initiative to increase diversity and inclusion for Oscar nominees is the privacy issue. So I have here a quote from the LA Mag article. Not surprisingly, the plan is not being universally applauded in Hollywood. Critics say it's invasive, anti-creative, opens the door to privacy issues, and is spectacularly unfair to actors and crew members who may want to keep their sexual orientation or health profiles to themselves, not to mention to producers and directors who have enough to worry about while shooting a movie than to be saddled with the thankless task of tallying up the identity markers of their creative partners. Yeah, just from a production standpoint. So I have a friend who does sound for movies and TV shows, and so many things fall through the cracks. Basic things fall through the cracks when you're in the midst of shooting something. So now it's like on top of all that, we have to like go around with the person with the check with the clipboard. Oh, what's your race? What's your disability? It's just like, and like it's absolutely insane. It's putting way more pressure on productions, and I don't think that's going to help the end result. I don't think that like I want them to focus on the creative side and not checking off boxes.
And honestly, I think a lot of employees would be like, I don't really feel that I need to tell you these things. Like,
Right.
You don't need to know my mental health status unless it's literally creating a problem at work. You don't need to know my sexuality. Like, right. You don't need to know these things. And asking people to out themselves like this about anything private is not necessary. Like, it really, and honestly, if you ask these questions 20 years ago, or even 30 or 40, people would be like, excuse me, that's not okay. You're not allowed to ask me these questions. Like, right. Literally, some of the questions that they would have to ask are things you're legally not allowed to ask someone, like in an interview.
Right.
Like, you're not allowed to ask someone if they're married. You're not allowed to ask someone if they're gay or straight. You're not allowed to ask these questions. Yeah. So it's sort of like, why do you think it's okay to ask them once they're hired? Like, right. It's still not okay. You don't need to know.
Yeah. I hope that if and when these initiatives start to take place on productions going forward, that hopefully that there's like a wave of like cast and crew members answering not applicable or not available or whatever. There's just a whole wave of NAs. Okay, well I can't. I guess I
prefer not to answer. Prefer right. not to answer. Like
exactly.
When they asked me that on things, that's what I always put. I don't fucking care. They don't need to know. If they ask me what my preferred pronouns are, I say prefer not to answer. If they ask me if I'm a Ms., Mr., Dr., Ms., what Mrs., whatever, don't answer. Like, they don't need to know these things.
Right.
And it's funny too, because I could actually benefit from telling people I'm a woman on forums like that, because not only because of the ideology, but because then they don't send me like emails and letters that refer to me as a man. Because they do. And honestly, I'm like, it's not that big a deal. Unless I'm talking to a doctor, does it really matter that they think I'm a man?
Right.
Yeah. And really, honestly, if someone says, oh, if I had known you were a woman, I would have like given you priority. I would go, bye forever. Because I don't want to work with you. Right. If you literally tell me that, that means you treat the sexes differently in a way that is not acceptable. Like, it's acceptable for doctors to treat people of different sexes differently. Right. It's okay. Like, it's okay to recognize sex differences, but you cannot prejudge people's behavior and like worth and whether or not you give them priority in life based on their sex. That's not okay. So to me, I'm like, I get worried when I start hearing people say something like that about me. They're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were a woman. Let me change how I treat you to be nicer. I'm like, whoa.
Right.
So do you treat every man this way, or like, it's a big deal to me? I'm like, oh, you just told me you're prejudiced. You just admitted it. You just admitted to me that you're prejudiced. I don't think I need you in my life.
Right. Yeah.
And they don't get it. They think because I'm a minority, like technically, that would be good for me, that I would appreciate it. It's like, no, I don't want to be around you. I don't know what other ways you're prejudiced.
No. Right. No, it's ridiculous, because another thing too is that these standards are constantly shifting. So the list of identities that will need to be checked off is just going to keep growing. Like, that's just going to put more and more of a burden on production. So
they're going to put disabled on there. They're going to put a mental health issue on there. They're going to put overweight people on there. Everything's going to end up on there eventually. Like, except for white men. Straight
Right,
white
yeah.
men are literally not going to be on the list at all.
Yeah.
So that's the
So
one thing.
not really related to filmmaking, but still kind of related to pop culture. I recently applied to be a writer for Screen Rant. Just for the hell of it, just maybe write an article or two a week or something, make a little extra money on the side. And I declined because I was going through the training session, and there's a sensitivity portion, and it was so I needed to drink a beer to get through it. It was so bad. It was one of those things where it's like they would have a video playing, and if you clicked away, then the video would just automatically pause. So you had to sit there and like watch it. So it's like, all right, fine. Like I need to do something because I'm not going to watch it. I'm just, but I remember because this is just like a week ago. So I always thought that able-bodied was the politically correct term to describe someone who is, who didn't have a condition. I guess I don't know, but I thought able-bodied was the polite, politically correct thing. It is not anymore, or at least I guess Screen Rant is on the forefront of what's new in inclusive language. No, the new term is because I had to take a test and I failed the test. So able-bodied is not the correct term. The correct term is non-disabled.
What?
So disabled is like the default, and everyone else, it's just like, well, like how are you in relation to a disability?
Oh my God. That's so crazy.
And I thought able-bodied was like, for me, I thought it was only like a few years old. So I was like, okay, this will be the new term for the next 10 years or whatever. It's like, no, it's run its course. We got to move on.
They change it so fast. Well, and one of the reasons why they change it so fast is that people start using their terms in like acerbic kind of ways, right. And that pisses them off, so they have to change it again. Like, listen, when it comes to, I actually taught this in a classroom about words, because I taught a personal essay called "On Being a Cripple," and it was about the idea that words change over time because people use them in a way that is negative, and then the people want a new word that is no longer negative, and this happens for years and years and years and years and years. So like idiot and moron, they used to be, and dumb too, they all used to be medical terms. And then people use them badly, so we had to change them. And and then we got retarded. People started using it badly, so we had to change it. Now it's like, what is it? Mentally handicapped. Right. And then like, but people still use mentally handicapped badly too.
Right.
So to me, I'm sort of like, you're not going to stop people from using your words, your term, in a negative fashion if they want to. Get over it.
Right.
And they don't seem to get it. It's like, this is like trying to stop a waterfall. You're not going to make it happen.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Yeah. So getting back to the Hollywood thing and the Oscars, it's like those lists, if they implement this, those lists will need to be updated. I don't know, weekly, daily, hourly.
Yeah.
to reflect what the Twitter activists are in favor of now.
Well, and then so streaming networks have also kind of gone the inclusion route. Like you mentioned something about the marketing picture for Luke Cage, and it has mostly it's Black people on that show, obviously. But like when Resident Evil came out, that Netflix was going to do Resident Evil, and they showed all the photos and everything. And first of all, so many freaking Zoomers, and then like Wesker is played by Lance Reddick, which I like Lance Reddick, by the way. I liked Fringe. And he was in something else that I really liked that I can't remember, but he's good. But like I made so many jokes because Lance Reddick is among these Zoomers who all are diverse and like so many women, so many like different, races among the cast. Yeah. And Lance Reddick, his face looks like either kill me now or like I'm so fucking done. Like he does not want to be there. That's what his face says. And and it made me laugh so hard. And like, did anyone really want Resident Evil to be diverse? Like, we're talking about a series of video games that is about like weird body horror stuff and
Yeah.
shooting monsters.
Right.
And Wester is a monster, so you literally hired the black guy to be the bad guy, and and then like, oh, they made those shitty movies that got shittier as time went on. But like I don't think anyone cares about a Resident Evil adaptation in the first place, especially Resident Evil fans. So Netflix keeps making adaptations where they're like, what did all this plethora of people that we hired? We got all the colors in the crayon box in our new show, and don't you want to watch it? And I'm like, I don't know that I do. Like, and they keep having to cancel shows.
Yeah. You know what's funny is that like it's crazy how the culture wars has it changed my view on certain things. Because a few years ago, I would have been very critical of companies, of media companies, simply focusing on the bottom line, just how many subscribers and how much money are we making. But now I want them to go back to that. Because,
me too.
So, it's like, okay, just chase the dollar. So, like, I mean, so for example, like every time Dave Chappelle releases a special on Netflix, it might seem like a lot where Dave Chappelle releases a special, it gets a lot of controversy, and so Netflix gets 10,000 people yelling at them on Twitter. It's like, yeah, but you got 12 million people to tune in. Who gives a fuck about the 10,000 dipshits? Focus on the 12 million subscribers who tuned in. So it's like, now I'm like, yeah, dude, just chase the money now. Like, don't chase the Twitter cloud now. Just go for the fucking audience.
Well, and when they made the TV show Sense8, which I did watch, I haven't seen the movie yet, but I watched the show and I enjoyed it for the most part. I had some problems with it. But here's the thing. It's an incredibly diverse group of people, but they were from all over the world. There was literally a person who was in Africa. There was literally a person who was in India. There was literally a person in South Korea, and it was and one in Mexico. And it's like, yeah, so their diversity makes sense when you literally place them in these different countries. Like, it totally, I'm like, I don't have a problem with this. Obviously the Wachowskis have a trans character in there because they're trans. And honestly, if you are trans and you're writing about the trans experience, that makes sense to some regard. Like, it's like, it's, write what you know and everything. Like, I'm okay with that. But, and she wasn't like huge. She didn't over dominate the entire storyline. So it's not like, and it got to a point where it didn't matter that she was trans. Like, it didn't matter to the plot. It had nothing to do with anything. So it's like, I don't care anymore. I don't mind. So, like, to me, that worked. But then they do something where they have to gender swap, they have to race swap people to get it done. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, another pretty good example of super woke, which, by the way, the Obamas did, like, essentially buy Netflix. So it kind of, that's when things started going downhill. But like Altered Carbon, the first season is my one of my favorite TV shows of all time. It's so good, and it has diversity in it. There's a Mexican woman in it. There's a Russian Japanese guy in a white guy's body, so that's a little confusing. But and then there's a Muslim guy in it, and there is a Japanese guy and everything. And to be honest with you, none of that bothered me, and it was because the characters were all like real, and they were well developed, and the storyline was amazing, and it asked really interesting questions about consciousness and what makes you human and how do you deal with this kind of technology. It was really interesting. And season 2 comes out and I can't even finish it because they made everybody black. Everyone's black. And I'm like, okay, you have less diversity than you did before.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing is that, when you cater for the woke audience, like the super hyper woke audience is actually still very small. And here's the problem though too, is that they're also very fickle. You'll never be able to fully satisfy them. So like, I remember it was for the first Doctor Strange movie. The ancient one in the comics was an old Asian guy, but they at Marvel Studios thought that they changed his character to a white woman who was played by Tilda Swinton, because they thought that the old Asian guy, like, it was just too much of an Asian stereotype. But then audiences complained, or I shouldn't say audiences, woke audiences complained that they changed an Asian character into a white character. And so it's just like, yeah, they like, but that's the thing, is like, you lose the ethnic diversity, but you increase the gender diversity, but then it still pissed people off.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, yeah, how about just stay true to the source material?
There was also a thought that they changed it because he was from Nepal or Tibet. No, he was from Tibet.
Yeah,
and
yeah, that's right. Yes, that was also a factor.
That was the real reason why they changed it. They claimed it was because, oh, the Asian, master is a stereotype. No, you kind of changed it so that you didn't have to deal with the Chinese issue, the Chinese market issue. Like,
that's right.
And then they got mad, and and it's like, it's so silly to me though, because it's like you're trying to play to a Chinese audience that has a lot of race issues, a lot of issues about countries nearby, and you're also trying to play to a woke crowd. You cannot win both of those crowds at the same time. You can't. You actually can't. Like, you can edit the movie a little bit, but if you literally changed him to a white woman, it's not going to work with the woke crowd. Like,
yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised. They're like, oh, what if it's a white male? It's like, oh, but we can't do that. Let's change it to a white female then. It's like, okay, but that's still gonna piss people off. So it's like no matter what. Yeah, because the woke are constantly moving forward in their minds.
Blazing that trail that has a family of 4 walking down it before them. Yeah. That's the thing, is that they think they're trailblazers, but it's like, you are literally walking a path that everyone else has already walked. Like, when it comes to actual progress.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, you're blazing a walking trail. Okay. Yes. There's literally a bathroom down the road that you can use. Okay. But they act like they're so brave, and they're fighting back, and it's silly. It's really silly.
Yeah. And in many cases, they're going backwards down the path. So like, I've there are many woke people who will problematize like interracial couples, because they see like power dynamic between a white man wanting to marry a black woman. And there's like, that's just a white man trying to go back to his roots of owning a black woman first. And it's like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we're like, oh, cool, interracial couples, that's accepted, that's tolerated now, cool, great, that's progress. But now we're saying like, no, that's problematic, because it's like, what the fuck is wrong with you people?
I honestly, that was my big wake-up call in 2020, was when I started seeing all these people claim that interracial marriages were wrong, and that mixed race children were like a failing. I was like, holy shit. And that's when I really started like examining more of what they were saying, and I was like, this is hateful, this is bigotry, I'm not going to take part in this. And like, to me, the word intersectionality at first meant like, oh, you'd like really examine all aspects of this person's life, and you can discover that there's this way in which they're underprivileged and they're suffering, which that sounds reasonable. Like, oh, this person is billionaire, but they also have schizophrenia. Like, oh my God, that's terrible. I don't have schizophrenia. I'm lucky, and then, but then like, no, that's not what that means. No. They have a very rigid meaning of hierarchy for that, and I'm like, that's not. I'm not there for that. Like, because basically, you could be a homeless white dude and you'd be more privileged than basically everybody else. And I'm like, no, shut up.
Honestly, I think intersectionality is actually a great way to describe woke thought, because it is like an intersection of ideas, but they're all just kind of crashing into each other. Like, none of them, like they all. So it's just sort of like, so again, harkening back to my Silicon Valley startup days. Like, and this is coming from the same group of feminist oriented people in Silicon Valley. It's like, on the one hand, they're saying that men and women are equally talented, and therefore the reason why you're not hiring more women is because you're actually discriminating. But then on the other hand, they're saying women have unique traits than men, which is why you need more women, because they bring something unique. So it's like, which is it? Are men and women the same, or are they different? Like, I don't. This is coming from the same group of people. Like pick one. Well, I can accept one of those answers, but I can't accept the other at the same time. Like, pick one.
Yeah, really. Well, because there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on within woke ideology that is literally why it's driving them insane.
Yes,
but
yes.
there was, bringing it back to Netflix, there was another Netflix show, the Lost in Space TV show. I think they finally came out with a season 2, but I watched season 1. And the weirdest thing about that show is that it's a family of white people. Like, one of them is Molly Parker, I think is the actress's name. One of them is the guy who was the star of Black Sails. So a very ginger man. And their 2 kids and the mom's kid from a previous marriage, who is half black. And it's like because in the original, all 3 of the kids are both their kids. And they literally changed it to have her be, so that they could have her be black. Because they were like, we know it's only going to be these people, plus Dr. Smith, who turned out to be Parker Posey, of all people. But yeah, it was like, and I enjoyed it to the science and the interplay between the characters was all pretty good. But I was like, this is just weird. Like, honestly, this is a little weird that you felt the need to do this. And it seems like it's, and that show was from a few years ago. It seems like it's just getting worse. And it seems like they're literally passing on scripts and admitting they're passing on scripts across the board, not just at Netflix. So we have this other article where they admit it. They admit that they've been passing on scripts. Let's do what did it. It says says ABC passed on pilots for not being inclusive enough. So this means something like Friends, which is one of the highest grossing TV shows of all time, would not be made. And I have often heard that from various reviewers that Friends has no black people in it, and it almost doesn't. Like, it literally almost doesn't. And then like a show like The Big Bang Theory would be maybe not. Like Raj, that's a little better. Howard doesn't count. You know Howard doesn't count. But yeah, so they're like they're willing to pass on scripts, incredibly well written scripts.
Yeah, it's I mean, a big part of wokeness is attacking the very idea of marriage, which I don't know why they think in the industry that will result in good storytelling. It's like, I mean, like, just middle America likes to be entertained. Regular people who did not take gender studies courses. I mean, so there was a movie. It was a transgender vampire movie that came out a few years ago called Bit, and I did an article on it from Medium, and it was I hadn't seen the movie, but it was just based on interviews with the director, and he was talking about how he read all these feminist books and books on gender ideology and how he incorporated that into his film. And when you watch the trailer, it's so on the nose. I mean, it was so obvious that it was anti-male and all that. But it's like they're really going out of their way to make movies for people who have like masters in feminist dance theory or whatever. Like, it's
it's like, how small is your audience, man? How much money are you spending on this audience for, like, what, 10,000 people? Like, what the hell are you doing? And because here's the thing is that even people who have those degrees might not necessarily like movies.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a bigger risk, honestly, is making a movie that's like, well, this is about transgender ideology and placement in society. It's like, yeah, buddy, we're not going to give you $1 million to make this indie flick. It's like they're taking all the wrong risks in Hollywood. It's like, and again, going back to the thing, it's like, I'd rather that Hollywood went back to what they considered safe 10 years ago of just big dumb action movies. Like, that's better than what we're getting now.
Yes, definitely. Well, and then there's that movie Freaky. I think that came out last year. I don't know if you've heard of it. I watched it. I found it incredibly enjoyable. And one of the reasons why I wanted to watch it is because it had Twitter freaking out. And because they were like, oh my God, it's basically every cis person's nightmare you're playing up these things, and it's like, it has nothing to do with trans, okay? It's
Right.
Freaky Friday meets Michael Myers, okay?
Right.
That's the concept. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
fucking hilarious, okay? And it actually had a lot of woke moments to it. Like, there's a gay student in
Mhm.
it. There's
Uh-huh.
a point where her crush kisses her when she's in the body of Vince Vaughn. And
Oh.
it, like, so it's like, you guys complained about it, and it
No.
totally could have, like, nailed your ideas in the first place, because it kind of a little bit does, but
No.
it doesn't make it the centerpiece of the movie. The
Yeah.
movie is just supposed to be this fun, silly horror film, and it mostly is. That's mostly what that movie is. And
Right.
I could actually stomach some of that woke stuff, like, when it's that small. Like,
Right.
I'm not
Right.
gonna, like, oh my god, I'm so delicate. Not everything was perfect. Like,
Sure.
I'm not that delicate about my content, but
Right.
like, it was mostly just a fun movie, and they literally freaked out before they even saw it, just because of the trailers. And I'm so glad I did watch it, because I did really enjoy it, and I felt like it actually was taking some risks on that front, because it's like, it's risky to even bring up these subjects, because even bringing up their ideological, sacred cows, could result, even if you're supportive of them in the end, could end up getting you with a mob after you. That's how dumb these people are.
My roommate and I, we not too long ago, we watched that Clint Eastwood movie, Gran Torino. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I have seen that one.
And we were like, we really enjoyed it, and the whole time we're just like, yeah, this movie would get canceled so fast if it were to come out today. But it's also secretly woke, because it's about a grumpy old racist white man who learns to be less racist. But I doubt that a woke audience would be able to grasp that.
Well, I think that at that side, it might be considered, you could label it liberal at that point. Like, like, not necessarily like woke ideology.
Right.
I don't know. It's kind of like, because some of the, like, don't be a bigot is not, they don't own that. Like, I don't think they own it. They didn't come up with it, although they like to act like they did. It's much older than that.
Of course.
So to me, that's where that movie lands, which is a really good movie.
I love it. Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's definitely one that I suggest, because it brings up a lot of ideas about gang violence and how people can feel trapped by it, and like, it has some funny moments too. Like, when one of his kids gives him a grabber so that he doesn't have to, like, bend over or reach too high, and I'm like, yeah, you gave the guy who's Clint Eastwood, by the way, who's essentially a giant, a grabber. Like, he can reach all the top shelves, okay? And that always made me laugh, because it's like the most, and the point of that gift is to show how, like, disconnected his family is from him, and it's like, that's brilliant. You didn't have to tell me that. You showed me that, and that's the kind of stuff I feel like we're missing now, is the show don't tell, because it's so much easier to tell with ideology. It's so much harder to show, like, that something is, this is what you believe. That's, you can't proselytize when you're showing. It's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely, I see a lot of the proselytizing here in LA, just in local creative institutions. So, for example, I went to a while back, I went to the Hammer Museum, and seeing the contrast between, like, student art and, like, actual artists, it was night and day. Like, seeing, like, the more activist oriented stuff versus, like, they actually had some original paintings from Fresh Impressionists, and so they had, like, a feminist exhibition there that I managed to stomach a little bit. And I remember one of the works was a blown up picture of a naked woman from, like, Hustler magazine or something, and then just, like, neon paint just splattered on it. And it was obviously, it was about the male gaze, and, like, it was even in the description about subverting male expectations of beauty, blah blah blah. I was like, okay, there's nothing for me to ponder over. Like, I know there's no mystery here. I think a much more interesting approach to art making is something where it's like, yeah, it can be seen as feminist, but it can also be seen as favoring the male perspective on things. It's like, I like that. That's interesting. Confuse people, like give people,
Make them
this
think.
exactly. It always cracks me up. I can't remember the last time that this happened, but like whenever a movie comes out and both conservatives and liberals are angry about it, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like it's pissing people, it's pissing everybody off, because different people can come to it and come out of it with different interpretations. Like that's what good art should do.
Yes, definitely. You remind me of something. I saw something when I was in college. There was a room that they displayed art in the art building, and one of them, it was all the art was by this one guy, and it was all just drawings, just pencil drawings. And one of the drawings is of a young woman. You can't quite see her face, and she's like doing this, and she's got this like look of anguish kind of underneath her fists. And I was like, wow, that's like a lot of emotion going on there. And then I looked at the title, and it was called Miranda's Rights. And I was like, whoa. Because if you know the history of the Miranda's Rights thing, that one was kind of a gut punch. I was like, okay, you said what you actually wanted to say, but you did a good job of it, honestly.
Right.
Because, like, I don't know, Justice Earl Warren is someone, like, if he was a collectivist, he was an activist judge, and he was progressive, he was already a problem, and he didn't care about victims' rights. And so to me, I was sort of like, I already knew the history of all that, but you have to know a lot to really understand that image.
Right.
Like, except for the fact that, like I said, the drawing, it's already evoking it. You're like, wow, she's in a lot of anguish. You can see that.
Yeah.
So it's like he did capture the feeling, at least, like, and it's probably how he felt reading about the Miranda's Rights situation, which I understand, because I felt horrible reading about that. I was like, this felt like a miscarriage of justice to me. So, but like the thing is, though, is that like he didn't come out and say Justice Earl Warren is an asshole, like it wasn't like a drawing of Justice Earl Warren with his throat slit or something stupid like that,
Right. Yeah.
which I would have considered like, this is dumb. Like, I don't need to see this,
Yeah.
There's like a different quality to that.
Well, even when a story conveys a political or social idea that I agree with, I still don't like it, because it's like, yeah, okay, I'm agreeing with it, but I didn't come to a movie to agree with it. I came to be hopefully challenged, like put me through the ringer, like show me something that I've never experienced before. But don't just be like, yeah, this is where we stand on this issue. It's like, yeah, okay, I agree, but I'm not at a rally. I'm here to just be entertained, and like I don't want to think about politics right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think with movies are a lot harder to really push an idea through, I think, like, because of the movies and fiction, because I'm sort of like, you need to give me good characters, strong plot, you need to focus. There's a lot of demands on that kind of story. And like a piece of static art, like, is, it's like, it's just an image, you just look at it, you just glance at it, like, it's not like you could stare at it for a very long time if you wanted to, but it doesn't give you, it's not as engaging, honestly, as a movie. And I know a lot of artists are going to be pissed at me for saying that, but a movie is 2 hours long and involves a lot of moving parts, and that's just the truth of it. And so to me, I feel like it's a lot harder to maintain contact with an audience for that long and just proselytize. It's like sitting there for an hour and a half, or reading, like, oh my God, reading a whole novel of just proselytizing. You are asking a lot of your audience, a lot of their engagement. And I can't, like, you can sometimes get away with it with satire, with something short, but like, honestly, if you are doing something that you're just trying to entertain people, you cannot proselytize. I just don't see how it's going to work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. and yeah, but it's easy for the writer to do that. To just be like, yeah, this is what I think, so this is all I'm going to be. Every line of dialogue will be to serve this idea. I'm going through a wonderful screenwriting book right now, and even though the book was written, I don't know, 2010, like before a lot of this woke stuff came along, I'm glad that even the author of the book recognized the difference between having a theme and lecturing your audience. Like it's one thing to have like a general idea, but make sure that you're not constantly hammering it home. And he goes, even if you take a stance on it, make sure that you give just as much ammunition to the opposite of it. So even if let's just say something non-political. Let's just say that the theme of your movie is family is the most important thing of life. Okay, fine, that's something that we can all generally agree with. But if that's going to be like the main point of your movie, then make sure to have some scenes about how destructive families can be. Like, don't just constantly tell your audience, hey, family is important. Remember, family is important. That family's number one. It's no, but I'm also going to show the flip side of how sometimes families can be very destructive for individuals. But that takes a lot of work that a lot of writers, I think, especially in this cultural landscape where it's easier to get work, criticizing straight white men than it is to be like, I'm going to dive deep into what is politics and how power can corrupt even good people. It's like, I'm going to dive deep into that. It's like, no, this has to. We want the Democrat to win in this movie.
Well, and then it's kind of funny because I'm thinking about the idea that you there's all these writers who essentially want to write fiction, which is in movies or books or TV shows, whatever, what have you, and tell us exactly what to think and what they think about these very serious subjects, to which I respond, write an article. Yes. I have no problem with you giving your bullshit ideology in an article. Just do it because but don't bring it into fiction.
Yes.
Like, I want you, if you are going to be in fiction, you better be daring. Yeah. You better take risks, and you better look at really how the other side works, the other side of things.
Right.
And it's difficult. That's a lot of hard work, I know, but be daring and put in that work. Like you guys, they always say, put in that work. And I was like, you do it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but it is very difficult. It's difficult for the artist to put in the amount of work into the story of giving multiple sides their due. And it's also difficult, when the story's released. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, like people are gonna take different opinions on it. So it's. I understand the impulse to have I want my audience to learn something from this movie, and I want them to see the world the way I see it. But you also have to be willing to be like, yeah, this will probably provoke the exact opposite reaction that I intend, but I'm willing to endure that as the artist because I've said what I needed to say, and I'm gonna let it's in the audience's hands now. That's not easy for a lot of artists to do.
Yeah, and I don't think that art is a spineless game. It really isn't. Because here's the thing, you are putting a piece of yourself in that work.
Yeah.
And it hurts when someone doesn't like it, but someone's not going to like it. I guarantee it. It's a 100% possibility it's a guarantee. It is going to happen. Someone's not going to like it. They're going to say really mean things about it, and you have got to be prepared for that.
Yes.
And honestly, it's kind of hilarious and immature to hear people go like, "Oh, some people don't like it. It must be because." Yeah, then they have to yeah, they have to give all these excuses as to why, and it's like, no, it's because you did something they didn't like. Just admit it. And maybe what you did was actually bad. And that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Have some humility in being an artist. It takes bravery, but it also takes humility. You can't.
Yes. Right.
You can't
absolutely.
be spineless and arrogant in being an artist.
There's a great quote from Albert Camus, the existentialist guy. He gave a speech in 1957 after he won the Pulitzer Prize, and the speech is actually you can buy it. It's a little booklet thing. It's called Create Dangerously: The Power and Responsibility of the Artist. And I definitely recommend everyone who's interested in this culture war that we're going through, and especially its effects on the artists, to check it out. It's cheap. It's like $7 or something for like a little thing. But there's a great quote in there that has really stuck with me. It goes something like this: but perhaps there is no peace for an artist except for the peace found in the heat of battle. And I love the idea of the artist being a fighter, of like, no matter what, there will always be challenges. There will always be someone who's trying to silence you, whether it's from the political side or the social side, or from the critical side, or from the business side. Like you have to stand by your work, and don't think that you can just release something into the world and people will love it and you will be cherished and you will make money from that. So no, you have to fight at every stage. You're gonna have to fight writer's block. You're gonna have to fight the lack of ideas. So I want to see more artists stand up and take risks and be willing to endure the slings and arrows of going out there and saying, this is what I think is going on in the world right now. And if you don't like it, then that's fine. I don't care. I'll take my business elsewhere. But we're seeing too many creators, especially in Hollywood, to bring it all back, who are just willing to bow down to a very small, a relative minority of people who are saying, no, this is what you should think, and this is who you should vote for, and I want you to reflect my political views. It's like, yeah, they're making movies about explosions and aliens and dragons. Like, don't politicize this.
Oh, and especially politicizing superhero fantasy. Like it's literally a fantasy. Like it's so insane to politicize that. Like a lot of art is escapism. Superheroes are one of those.
Yes.
And it's like, I don't want politics in my escapist fantasy. Okay. Especially not there.
Right.
And it's funny too, because I don't necessarily mind political themes and like more serious content and everything, but I don't know. They gotta have it in everything. It's gotta be everywhere.
Right.
Like a virus.
Right.
To kind of quote Gadzad. But thank you so much for joining me tonight, Joe. We were on for a while, so I'm like, I gotta go feed the cats. But let my audience know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Joe Garza Creates. And on Medium, I'm also under Joe Garza, and the Reckless Muse. Just search for that on Medium, and that's where we have the publication. And if anybody out there is interested in writing some articles for the publication, I would love to hear from you. And check out our podcast, the Reckless Muse Cast. We're also on Twitter. So yeah, search us and you'll find us. And thanks for having me on, Alex. This is great, and looking forward to the next conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So this was 451 Degrees, the anti-censorship podcast on the Unsafe Space Network. If you could walk your fingers over to the like, share, and subscribe buttons, we really appreciate it. Tomorrow there's going to be an interesting episode of Rebel Civets about the Second Amendment. I'm just going to say it right now. There is no dangerous thoughts tomorrow. Yeah, I know. We're all going to have our own dangerous thoughts this week, unfortunately. And then we got Token Minority Report on Thursday, and that's the schedule for the rest of the week. Hopefully Narrative Dissonance is back on Monday. I will let you guys know on social media, and I will see you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you're new to Unsafe Space, check out our deep content library that includes discussions with everyone from James Lindsay to Brett Weinstein. And please consider helping to fund our work by visiting unsafespace.com/donate. You can find us on a variety of social media platforms, and you can find a community of like-minded individuals on our Unsafe Space Discord server, which is open to financial supporters at any level. We hope to see you there.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. The content of this production does not meet WHO health and safety standards. Please report to a United Nations Sanitization Center immediately. Association with the following individuals is strictly prohibited. Experts who benefit from printing money agree that printing money does not cause price inflation. Trust me, just 2 more weeks to slow the spread of monkeypox. If you think about it, no one should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Science, scientific, and scientifically are registered trademarks of the World Economic Forum. Unauthorized use is prohibited. Computer voice courtesy. Never mind, that last line is fake news. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.